Recording? Is this thing on? Is this thing on? It looks like it. Goodness. We're live. And, well, we're taped. Hi! Theology of the Body, episode 3. I'm your host, Alan. Thanks for coming by again. Hopefully you're watching these in order, because the first 2 episodes were kind of freaking critical. So, let's get down to business. What we do here on Theology on Tap is we drank and we talk about God. So, this week's drink, and by this week, I'll be honest, I'm filming these things like weeks between each other because I've got a very busy life. But, you know, we'll see. Well, anyway, so, episode 3. This week our drink is called a Cape Cod. It sounds awfully fancy, doesn't it? I can't wait to show you guys how fancy this is. Come on over to my basement fridge. We got rocks in my shot glass. Oh my goodness, have they frozen in my shot glass? There we go. Come out, little guy. There we go. Oh, just one more. There we go. I don't keep ice in my downstairs fridge. That's so embarrassing. So, like any good drink, it starts with the rocks. And, oh, shut that freezer. Please stay shut. Oh, my freezer's so full of pizza rolls right now. It's not funny. And I've got Kirkland vodka, because, you know, when you've got lots of kids, you shop at Costco a lot. Also, by the way, best known secret, Costco has great prices on a lot of liquor. They don't have a good bourbon, in my opinion. Like, they have a top shelf bourbon. Oh, that's just disappointing. I don't even have a shot left of vodka. This is what poor planning will do for you. Well, we're going to go with this anyway. My point being, definitely go to Costco. I'm going to Costco tomorrow. I'll tell you that. Because this shit here, it's like $14 for like a handle. It's awesome. So disappointing. Okay, well, go Pats. And vodka. First step to making a Cape Cod. This might sound really familiar. If I were you, I would prepare the way that I'm not prepared and juice a lime, because you want actually a lime slice, but I'm a broke ass bitch and I like to use lime juice and cheat it. But you want a twist of lime is what you're trying to go for, and you want cranberry juice. It sounds like I'm really cheating here. Like, isn't that just called a vodka cranberry? Actually, it is called a Cape Cod. So suck it. Because go Pats, home of Cape Cod. And and really, the reason I chose this drink for this week. Oh, put all this away. It's because we're finally digging into brass tacks. We have landed on Plymouth Rock. We're about to actually break into the Bible here. And by that I mean we're kind of, we're not going to read the whole Bible in one night, because nobody can do that. Actually, I've never done it myself, like ever, over like years, never read every single page of the Bible. Sorry for checking my fridge. It's got a loose seal. Actually, festive little side note, the Catholic Church actually schedules what Bible verses they're going to read in every Mass. And bear in mind, they have Mass every single day. So over the course of 3 years, they have literally read every line of the Bible, because they're reading some of it every day. So it takes like 1,000 days or something to read the whole Bible. At least if you're sober about it. Sober, this guy. So, what I'm talking about here tonight is that how to interpret the Bible from a Catholic perspective. Because Protestants, as you know, are huge on sola scriptura, and also not being told by an authority like how it should be interpreted, like just go ahead and read it. And Catholics are very much not that guy. Like there is a message to it. Okay, so like here's a great mental exercise to start off. Learn these 6 words, and I will say that I stole this, I think, from Jason Evert. Evert. He's a great guy. Look him up. But memorize these 6 words. Actually, it's better if you write them down, because that'll demonstrate my issue a little better. The words are, I never said you stole money. Write it down. Now I want you to reread that. Give it 15 minutes so you forget why you wrote it down. And think to yourself, what if you put the stress on different words in that sentence? I never said you stole money. That guy did. I never said you stole money. But maybe I implied it in a certain way. I never said you stole money. That guy stole money. I never said you stole money. Maybe you came into it. Maybe it was legit, but you know. I never said you stole money. Okay, well, you stole something, but it just wasn't cash value. Well, fuck, it sounds like just 6 words can be taken a lot of different ways, son. And that's why you need an authoritative source who knew the guys who can say, no, this is what they meant when they wrote that story. I'm sorry, this is not open to interpretation. I know we've got this written down, but writing is, you can read it. Just all you have to do is read it the wrong way, and then you're totally fucking off course, man. So like, the Jews knew this too, you know, like they had a procession of a priestly class that said, we're going to interpret the Torah and read it to the people and you know, apply it to daily life. But if you're not sticking to it, like, there's a tradition that goes with, you can, like, sola scriptura pisses me off because of how short-sighted it is. It's a terrible idea to say, oh, let's just give everybody the Bible and then they'll just all interpret it. They're all going to interpret it wrong. There's so many thousands of ways to go wrong. But there's a way it was intended, and that's the way you're supposed to read it. Sorry for my huff. But that's how the Catholics look at this whole thing, right? It's part of forming the canon in the first place, and we'll get back to that a little bit later. So, but my point is, this is the Catholic way to look at the Bible when you read it, okay? And unfortunately, this is one of the things that I don't spend any time talking about at Mass. If you're just going to Mass, and I hope you are still, if you're just going to Mass, I promise you a priest has not dug into how to interpret the Bible as a whole or anything like that. It's probably like written between the lines, like you'll see it, like after this episode with any luck, you'll see how your local priest gets their homily and, you know, like where that's all coming from, but, like, I don't know, I'm just giving a background. But I feel like this is a critical point that is never actually made at church or even in a lot of catechism classes or RCIA classes. So I want to dig into this, okay? That's today's episode. Second, trying to get better about saying our prayer early. Or I guess we could close with a prayer. No, you know what? I'm going to do the prayer right up front because I want to, number 1, knock it out. B, let the Holy Spirit guide me through the rest of my hour, right? So, raise a glass, cross yourself, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen? That's left, then right, for the record. We're going to do St. Michael like we've been doing. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Second, new prayer. Whoa! Episode 3, we're getting deep, son. And bear in mind, I started you with the harder, longer prayers because I figure with more episodes to continue repeating them, you have more chances to practice them. So I'm going to be like making my prayers shorter and shorter as we go in the series so that the new ones are easier to pick up and you've got more time to practice the hard ones. Good deal? I think, like, you know, your regular school probably started you with like the cupcake things before they moved you on to big things. And like, no. You need more time to address the big things and then we'll polish up with the cupcakes. So we'll get there. Prayer number 2. Sorry, I'm a ham. The memorare, okay? This is an extended long prayer to the Virgin Mary. We'll talk about why she's important later. But, and also for the record, Catholics don't worship Mary. I don't know where that comes from. I mean, like, we put value on her, so in that way, like, the etymology of the word worship applies. We find her worthy to talk about, so that's worship. Worthship is where the word comes from, just FYI. That being said, Catholics don't worship Mary as if she's part of God, like, or, a Trinity or anything like that, the way that Jesus is part of the Trinity. It's just that I'm going to spend an entire chapter, I'm pretty sure, in the future on Mary. Like, she's very important. But consider this, okay? And I'll spend another chapter on this too. But you know what? I'm cutting it short. I'm wasting time. We're going to ask Mary to pray for us because she's close to Jesus. Let's put it that way. Jesus likes her. She's whispering in Jesus' ear, sweet nothings, caressing him. It's his mom. She trusts him, So we're going to pray to her to get on Jesus' good side with her on our side. Sound good? All right. So, memorare, kind of a long one. Ready? Remember, O most gracious, loving Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. And I'm sorry for being really, hardcore and old school, and I do my these and those, so let me actually walk you through that real quick. Remember, O most gracious, loving Virgin Mary. Hey, Mary, keep in mind that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, that for all of eternity, everyone who went to you to be protected, implored thy help, or asked for your help, or sought thy intercession, or asked for you to be an advocate for them, was left unaided. You never failed to help anyone who asked for you to be an advocate, or just come to their side, that kind of thing. You're always there. We trust you, and you've always been cool, Mary. Inspired by this confidence, I come to thee, O Virgin of Virgins. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. I'm an asshole. I'm a douchebag, and I'm sorry. I'm so not worthy of your help. O Mother of the Word incarnate, that's what you are. Despise not my petitions. Don't be mad about the things that I ask about. Please, please, please. Oh, jeez. We can't despise my petitions, but, oh my gosh, I just said it. Well, rewind the tape. Anyway, it makes sense. Read it in English. Just think about it harder. Mary's a cool chick, and she will help you, okay? In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Mary, please help me with this. My mission? This is my weird mission? This is very, I don't know. It's very me. I put it that way. That's actually kind of where I want to reach out on you, too. Is that, if you think you're kind of a shithole and not a perfect evangelist, doesn't mean you shouldn't try, man. That's all I'm doing here. So how do we read the Bible? First off, we're not biblical literalists in the Catholic Church. I already crossed that and said it. Actually, that's not true. I said Sola Scriptura was a bad idea. Whoa, whistle. I think I chipped my tooth. I did chip my tooth. Fuck. So, yeah. Atheists love to pick on Christians for being biblical literalists. It's like, oh, yeah, Noah's flood. Oh, the whole world flooded. You guys are idiots. And it's like, well, but no, actually, the Catholic Church does not doctrinally believe or enforce that you have to believe the entire world did flood for exactly 40 days. Like that, no. And that's not a new change either. This is the messed up part. And what I think is very dishonest of atheists to say. Actually, I'll throw them a bone. It's not dishonest. It's that they don't know. So they're ignorant. And I mean that, not in the insulting way, but in the they didn't know way. So, let's be charitable. They didn't know that Catholics have not read the Bible literally since, before there was Christianity. Because even the Jews didn't read the Bible literally. in the times right before Jesus. Now there was mixed, like it was the intelligentsia, as it were, of Judaism. The theologians were already considering that it was probably not literally what happened, but they knew that it was the inspired word of God, and we'll come back to that. But like very early writers, even a few before Christ was born, were saying certain facts of reality and the way we observe, the way animals grow up and the like they found enough evidence to say it's a bit silly to think that all of these things in existence could have been made in just 7 days. Like maybe the days are symbolic. And like this came out hundreds of years before Christ. Biblical literalism is actually a really new thing. And now there's always been a group of people that just took the Bible literally, but to codify that as a doctrine is a new thing. That's fundamentalism, and that didn't start until the 1800s, man. It's very wrong-headed to characterize all of Christianity as being biblical literalists, and second, definitely dead wrong in all times, in all cases, to call Catholics biblical literalists. And even the same thing for Orthodox Jews. This is a fact, dude. You can look this up. There's tons of books on it. I think Thomas Aquinas talks about it plenty. Maimonides, oh my god, I always pronounce his name wrong. Is it Maimonides? Anyway, this is a really smart Jewish guy. I want to say in the medieval times, Gothic age, maybe like 600 or 700, who goes into that in depth for just the Torah. They were not dumb people, dude. I'm telling you. And that's why it was really important that the Bible and the Torah, for that... Oh, sorry. Here's the Torah. As if you know what a Torah is. The Torah is the Jewish name for the first 7 books of the Bible in the Old Testament. Because I know the Pentateuch is the first 5. I don't remember the Torah if it's like 7 or 8, and I don't even remember. I can't even tell you what books they are, to be honest. Like Genesis is obvious, but in Deuteronomy and Numbers and a couple others, Leviticus probably. But anyway, Maimonides. You know what? I'm gonna go Google how to spell his name and put it in the description if you want to Google him. But he's a smart fucking guy, and I really respect him. So. They knew it was allegorical, but with a lot of very deep and insightful symbology. The kind of stuff that Jordan Peterson talks about, which, again, I'm awestruck by that guy only because he had almost no theological background and managed to figure out all the shit people have been saying since Maimonides, that's his name, Maimonides, I think. In Origin and all these ancient thinkers, like in St. Augustine, go Jordan Peterson, man, for figuring that out on your own. That's pretty badass. Anyway, so, not literal, because what happened was, it only makes sense that ancient peoples had their beliefs, and I'm going to go ahead and forward you to Jordan Peterson's biblical studies, because he talks about how ancient people would have they were observing each other, right? For well before the invention of writing. They had been growing up, they'd been growing together, and they'd seen how each other act, and they've been critiquing each other is a better way to put that. They've been assessing what's the patterns of human nature and how do we act, and what would be the best way forward. And they summed it up in stories because a story is easier to remember the order of operations, what happened, what was the consequences, and it's a way to abstract things that they really didn't even have the vocabulary for prior to that. Now we have psychological vocabulary, philosophical vocabulary, all these jargon terms, the other and the abyss of Sartre shit, and they didn't have that way back then, but they could still understand the concept and grasp it. They just couldn't articulate it. And the best way to articulate it was to act it out. And so they would develop stories that then described what they learned of studying each other and how human nature works and how humans relate to the wider world. You know, like they immediately recognize we are not like wolves and squirrels. Like we see each other form societies, contemplate reality, like why are we here and how do I know myself and am I being true to myself and what is justice? Like a fucking cat doesn't ask those questions. So like the divinity, the transcendental aspect of being human was very clear to all ancient people all around the world well before the invention of writing. Right? And so they're all trying to find a way to justify and explain how that came to be. Why are they so better evolved than all the other life on Earth? And for that matter, does it come with a responsibility? And that's pretty much how every religion got started. Everything from, you know, ancient Hinduism and Zoroastrianism, I mean, you name it. I guarantee you even the, you know, ancient Australian Aborigines and shit, like in every African tribe, like, or in the Norse mythology too. Like that's how that shit came together, was they were trying to figure out, this is what people do, this is how life works, and nature is a very hard place to live in, but we're above animals, we're different, and we are somehow connected and of interest to a higher consciousness that is not physically observable. Like, and that's a really fucking abstract thing to say, and it's things that they probably didn't even invent words for. I mean, like, you think about being a caveman, the only words you really need to know are like hungry, hunt, sex, fire. Like, you don't need a whole lot of things, and you just say a want, and you know, control, force, fight. Like, just the basic shit. Notice that most of these are like 1 and 2 syllable words, by the way, because they're not complex concepts. They're the things people want to know and want to say immediately. Like if you're a linguist, this should definitely play into everything you've studied in Linguistics 101, because the purpose of language being a communication, you get to the important shit first. When you look at language as a tool to communicate, it's like, well, you've got your must-haves, your immediate needs, and then you've got your, like, explaining those immediate needs, and then you've got these higher needs that come later. Like basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs is turned on its side that way, and you know, now we're talking about self-actualization words. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't, because you haven't Googled Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Fucking do it now. I'm gonna sit. And if you weren't positive, it's M-A-S-L-O-W. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is a great guy. So I'm out of vodka, and that really sucks. Okay. Hannah Hart, where are you? Okay, so we're going to switch to Maker's Mark, because, you know, improv is really where the fun is. And, is it, do I have Maker? Yeah, I got it. Okay. The problem is, oh my gosh, do I have any cola down here to mix it with? That'll be really kind of a funny thing to ask. I love being unprepared for things. I love improv. You know what I also really love is karaoke, because everything goes wrong in karaoke, especially when you can't sing like me. I can't carry a tune in a bucket. But damn if I don't have enthusiasm. So, oh boy. So what we were talking about was also, that's the trick, right? Is that there was an oral history for a long time among the Jews where they had discussed, like every other nation on the earth, what are we doing here? Why do we exist? And how, like, what have we learned from this over thousands of years of iterations, of generations, of studying each other and saying what's right, what's wrong, what's worked, what kind of person, do you need to be, does every member of the tribe need to be for us all to succeed? And there was an oral history of stories that explained good, evil, virtue, vice. And they wanted to pass this on. So they found ways to say, like, you know, in the beginning there was, humans were innocent, and then they just decided they knew better than God, and blah, 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 and we'll come back to that. And it's all led into terrible things, and that's why this is why we can't have nice things, is basically what it is. And that was true of every religion, and that oral history probably existed for several thousand years before it was written down. And, you know, maybe you say, oh, Alan, he's just full of bullshit. No. Think about this, though. Native Americans are still around. Some of those tribes don't have a system of writing to this day. And they still remember all of their traditional stories and their origin stories going back tens of thousands of years. And they can recount to you to the letter. Well, there's no letter because they don't have a written history. But every word of that story they know. Because, like, being illiterate or not having a language actually really helps you with your memory, because it's the only way you can remember shit. So, and especially if you codify your ideas into a story that is crystallized and you remember that makes it's a mnemonic. In fact, there's theories that that's why poetry was invented. They would make lines rhyme and go to a song, lyrics to a song, so that people could remember all the bits of the story in order, and even the exact words chosen because they rhymed. And it's like you had to have that before you invented writing. That's the fucked up part. We totally take for granted the fact that we have writing as an invention. That's an invention. People sat around and decided how to make this. And it's like, you think the only invention is the fucking smartphone? No, man. Back to our fucking basic nuts and bolts. We didn't have a system of writing until a certain point. But we had evolved to be Homo sapiens well before that point. You got to think about that. So, when writing was finally invented, every religion or every culture on Earth immediately documented what's the most important thing we could possibly write down. Oh, I know, our way of living. And that was that religion. So it's true for Hindus, it's true for, Confucianism was post-writing, but Shinto is a good idea. Japanese Shinto has been around way before that. And, you name it, man. Fucking the Norse and the Native Americans and the Jews, like anybody else, and the Egyptians. Like, they all had these traditions well before they got written down. They only got written down maybe in, 3000 BC-ish. There's a good number of studies out there that talk about some major event in 1170, I want to say, BC, about the fall of multiple civilizations around the world. There was a global economic collapse around that time. Interesting stuff if you want to go look that up. But it was around that time that writing was invented, is the fucked up part. And then the first thing they did was document how great life was before the world fell apart in 1170 BC or something like that. So let's see if I've got a mixer before I talk too long. You know what mixes great with whiskey is ginger ale, which is why I keep an emergency stash of ginger ale for just such an occasion. So it's actually for guests, but I'm an idiot. So what we like to say in the Catholic Church is that, much in the same way that Jordan Peterson points out, that people observed in reality that there were hierarchies of competence, right? That in any group of people, somebody who's better at doing that thing rises to the top, becomes the leader of the others of the people who are doing the same thing, right? So, multiple people are interested in archery. Also, I think it's fucked up that everybody around the world invented a bow and arrow. I would have never fucking come up with that. Hey, let's take a stick and bend it with this piece of fat from an animal. How the oh, and then I'll shoot a stick off of it. And that blows my mind. I would have never thought about that today. But apparently everybody in the fucking world thought about that in, the Ice Age. But the idea was that, God, I got so off track. The word of God and the words of man. So, yeah, so hierarchies, right? So let's say all the archers in a tribe get together and they, practice, and it's like the one guy who's the best at shooting, they're like, dude, he should be the lead hunter because he's got the best shot. Durr. And then he teaches you, hey guys, here's how I figure out what's great is when you take your eye and put it here, and I'm going to train all y'all on how to shoot arrows. Smart. All of you benefit when the guys at the top of the hierarchy teaches the rest of you how to shoot bow and arrows, right? And so, but then there's, the hunting and then the cooking hierarchy and the leadership hierarchy, and then, what about, who's the leader of leaders of multiple hierarchies? This is one of the things that Jordan Peterson's talking about in one of his studies. And the ideal of ideals is what they then kind of see as being, he says that is God, and that is kind of true, but I think on a more sober day I can explain that. But anyway, that's the idea, is that God is not like some old dude with a fucking beard, some fairy in the sky, like atheists like to say. God is this force that has a consciousness that is the source of all truths. And that's hard, especially if you try to picture that. You should technically not even be able to picture that because it's a concept more than it is a thing. And that's kind of fucked up. And you should think about how fucked up that is. Actually, oh man, we get into Theoria at some point. That's the Eastern Orthodox vision of what God is, or God's essence is. You have to think about, if everything that is created came from God, then God itself is not created. So now, as a meditative practice, in a very Eastern kind of way, cross your legs and go om, om, try to picture everything being created from this thing that itself was never created but always was. What is the uncreated? That's Theoria. It's that's fucked up, man. It's a cool thing to think about. But anyway, so point being, everything that people observe, both about each other and about concepts and about, justice. Where does justice come from? We all just expect and understand that there's justice in the world and justice in life and that good things come to good people. But then, where does any of that come from? Why is there justice out there, right? And, so they try to grasp on that and they try to articulate it, and that's the hardest part, is because they can conceive of the idea clearly, but they have a very hard time putting that into words and communicating it, especially among other humans. And so the idea is that it's the words of God, the order of God, the logos, right? The order of God, the logic of reality, things make sense at all. That's the fucked up part. It's actually more fucked up when you think about it, that life makes more sense than it doesn't. Because in any system, if you just take a jar of marbles and roll them on the floor, they're going to roll fucking everywhere. They're not going to randomly land in the shape of your name. That would never, ever happen, to spell out your name in marbles by just pouring them out on the floor, right? And yet, the universe is very fucking ordered. There's galaxies, and then under them there are solar systems, and then under them there are planets, and then under them there are moons. And even atoms look like tiny little solar systems. It's how and why the fuck does any of this have order? Really think about that, okay? And ancient people kind of noticed that, but they couldn't put their finger on how, and they couldn't say how, because they didn't have the words. Language itself was a new invention for a long fucking time before they got writing. And while they had language, they came up with stories. Because that was the best they could do, given the tools they had. Okay? I think people really underestimate how smart ancient people were. They just didn't have good technology, but they were smart. In fact, they were no less smart than we are today. They just didn't understand how to make ink. That's the fucked up part. A very smart person who has bad tools is not a dumb person. It's a smart person who doesn't have tools. I feel like that's the major heresy in today's world. Oh, you know, these primitive people. No, they're not primitive. They're fucking smart. They just don't have the tools. You know, you'd say that about some African tribe or whatever, but I'm like, that's what I'm saying. It's like, no, they're not dumb. Like, these Inuits are not dumb. They just don't have the tools. So anyway, so that's the idea, right? Is that these ancient people had some very deep wisdom, some very deep insight that they got through trial and error over thousands of years, and they boiled it down to stories they could remember and pass on. Things like the rain dance, like, you know, like Native Americans, like they still, it's not just mumbo jumbo. Like, it's important to those people because it's part of their collective wisdom, and they just didn't have a different tool to pass it on with. So they put it into a story, and they put it into personification too. They, you know, here's a god of thunder, here's a god of birds, whatever, right? But the Jews said that the god of thunder, or the power that controls thunder and the power that controls birds, are all subordinate to this one singular truth that is truth and love itself. Love itself, really. And we'll get back to that. And they knew it, but they didn't know how to say it. And they tried their damnedest. So that's the logos, the order of the, like, the universe is chaos to begin with, but it's put into order through the logos, right? We talk about that in the Bible. And that word of God is observed by humans and attempted to be codified into story, and when the technology exists, written down into word. The Bible is the Word of God. Yeah. But in the words of men. That's what I'm building up to, okay? It's the Word of God in the words of men. And this is really important. And we covered that in the last episode. Scroll back up. No, we totally did not. All right, well, whatever. I've got notes. Things happen. Why did I not do this in a different... hold on. And the thing is, when there's just, oh, yeah, no, I talked about this a lot. I'm funny. I'm a funny person. We talked about this. The musical genre, right? So that's the idea. It's the Word of God and the words of men. So, you know, it is limiting in the sense of, you know, once you invent a genre, it's great to describe that group of music and the things that this music has in common. But then it's hard to make new music without trying to pigeonhole it into a genre that exists. So if it could serve a purpose at first, we talked about this last episode. You know what I'm saying. So, the Bible, Catholic interpretation. It's the Word of God, but in the words of men. So it's their best. They know what they're talking about, but they don't know how to say it. And they're trying their hardest, okay? And so, yes, as such, it is open to flaws and some inconsistencies, but that doesn't make it incorrect. It could be less accurate than it could be. It could be a lot of things. It's, you know, but it's, you got to give it a chance. And you got to think, and you got to read between the lines. And you got to look at what they're trying to say. Okay? So, 40 minutes in, let's bust up into the next sections here. Let's just start with Genesis, because that's where everybody else starts with, right? So, you got the first 7 days. I just said a minute ago, people are like, oh, it's so ridiculous that the world could have been created in 7 days, especially since now we have science that can prove that it took, I don't even know the number. It's like 10, 20 billion years ago, that, which to me is honestly a short number, that the universe was created. And, Big Bang and poof. By the way, the Big Bang Theory was made by a guy named Georges Lemaitre. He's French, I think. He was a Catholic priest. Isn't that fucked up? Think about that. Do you like the Big Bang Theory? Did you know that you agree with a Catholic priest? Anyway, so we'll come back to that. But the point of the 7 days of creation is actually not like I at first it sounded like it held water, but it's actually bullshit. There's this idea out there that that ancient people came up with their myths so that they could explain physical phenomena. Like they were like, oh, well, you know, we have seasons and that's weird. So maybe this god of winter was like dating the god of whatever, and Persephone goes to visit Hades for a couple of months every year, and that's why we have summer. And okay, well, really what that was though is they wanted to understand how the seasons work. Actually, no, that turns out to be bullshit. Because like through anthropologists, through psychology, through evolutionary psychologists, no, they wanted to codify their way of living, and because through trial and error they figured out you need to live a life to a certain code, which they called morals, because it turns out that's how all of society, how the whole team benefits, is when everyone's living their moral code. The peasants and the royalty, and in the leadership or whatever, and on the side, isn't that handy that it kind of explains the seasons? Like, that was actually the side benefit. That wasn't why they came up with this shit, okay? Like you gotta, if you thought about that before, throw that one away, because it actually makes a lot fucking more sense to say, no, these people are trying to figure out how to live and survive, and then made that into a story, and then used the seasons as evidence to prop up their story that was the reason to live a certain way. We good? Okay. So, that's the whole thing, right? With the 7 days of creation. And I'll come back to the 7 in a minute, but what's really interesting about the 7 days of creation is that, oh man, my tooth is definitely chipped because I'm starting to whistle when I say my shush, 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 shush. Sorry about that. The words that happen on the first several phrases of the Bible is the 7 days of creation. Thank you for having patience with my drinking ass. First thing is that God separates the light from the darkness, right? Okay, that's cool. That's awesome. That's part of what the Logos is doing, is that like there's the chaos of existence, and then there's this order that is spoken into it. And what's kind of fucked up is that almost every other creation myth in the world, like from every other culture, is generally this violent smashing of whatever. Like the Chinese believe in an egg that then hatched, and then everything just blew up from this fucking egg. But the Christian tradition, or I should say the Jewish tradition, is that this consciousness that had an idea of order spoke order into the chaos, commanded the chaos to form a shape and be intelligible, recognizable. And it's kind of fucked up. And so that's, when he separated the light from the darkness and all that shit. People of ancient peoples definitely worshipped light as a god, because humans, if you haven't been playing D&D, have terrible day vision. They're not elves and they're not dwarves. They have shitty vision unless it's daytime. So the light was definitely something they worshipped, which is why fire was so fucking important. And so, like, there's definitely tons of cultures around the world. Like the Egyptians were worshipping Ra, sun god, mostly because he provides light. And also, vitamin D and heat and things that make the, grass grow and all that shit. But, yeah, light, dark. But what's fucked up is that the Jews are saying this other thing that is not light itself created light, brought light out from darkness. So kind of what they're saying in a kind of a side hook sucker punch is saying, hey, Egypt, your God is not the God. He's not the guy. There's this other God. He's the guy who made the guy. He's the guy behind the guy. See what I'm saying? And so then God hovered over the waters, and that's fucked up, actually, when you think about that, because water... You know what? I'm going to come back to that one. But God hovers over the waters, and he separates the dark from the light. And if you think for just 1 second, hold on, wait, back up, hombre. There was water? I thought you were making all the shit, but you hovered over the water and then separated the light from the dark? Where did the water come from? We'll talk about that in just a second. My point is that over the course of those 7 days, they bring up God sets the boundaries of the sea and raises the land up from the water. And God creates the plants and creates the animals. And every other culture on earth worshipped a certain animal as the highest animal, or plants as being the god of whatever. That's why we all come from, Brother Earth, Sister Sky, that kind of shit. And the Jews were saying, no. That thing you worship as a god was made by the God we're talking about. The earth, you worship that, was made by the truth that we're talking about. Those plants that you worship is made by the thing we're talking about. Those animals that are so powerful was made by the thing we're talking about. The 7 days is God, just the essence of truth, saying that's not divine, that's not divine, that's not divine. All of these things are subordinate to the main truth, the real truth. That's God up there. That's all the 7 days narrative is about. Moving forward, you got the evolution. We talked about the Big Bang for a little bit. I'm trying to read my notes. I'm sorry about this. Hover over the waters and stuff. Oh, okay. So we'll touch on that real quick. What's interesting with the hovering over the waters line? Like I said, how were there waters in fucking space when the Earth hasn't been invented yet? Like, that's kind of a weird internal inconsistency. When you first read it, if you were a biblical literalist or just an atheist hater, the water's thrown in there as a symbolic thing because the Jews were very big on water is a cleansing thing, and they would take baths. They actually had ritual baths that they would dip their entire body in before they went into the temple, called mikvahs, and mikvah, if I recall. And the idea is that every time you see water in the Bible, it is almost always a reference to washing your hands before you cook. Before you do something serious, you want to get rid of what you've done. Nowadays we know that that's getting germs off, but even ancient people knew that if you kept shit fucking clean, you'd live longer. Like that, you don't have to be a scientist to figure that out. And that was the whole idea, was that water cleanses. So the first thing you do when you're going to cook is you wash your hands. Make sure you have clean hands before you handle food. And so when the Holy Spirit hovers over the waters before it separates the light from the darkness, God's just fucking getting started, bro. He's just washing his hands. He's just getting ready. So every time you see water, think about that. It means something's about to start anew in the Bible, okay? That's why the water magically exists while God separates light from the darkness before there's even a fucking ocean. You're not looking at the right thing. Again, the Wally World thing, right? You're not paying attention to the details that matter in that story if you're going to be literalist about it. The reference to the water is just to say, we're starting fresh here. Something big and new is about to happen. That's all. So moving on. You get to Adam and Eve. There's tons of stuff written about that. Jordan Peterson does a great job of it, honestly. You should really at least watch his... I think it's like episode 3 or some shit. It takes him forever to get into the actual Bible. But his biblical study talks a lot about the depth of Adam and Eve. And I think the biggest thing to take away from that, from a Catholic perspective, is God tells him, you eat this apple, you're going to die. Satan shows up as a snake and he says, no, you're not going to die. You're just going to, God lying to you, whatever. Actually, that's not true. Satan, interestingly, never says an untruth, he tells the truth, he tells a half-truth, or he tells some of the truth and not all of it, so you get a skewed perspective. So he says, it doesn't mean you're going to die literally, physically. Whoa, burpins. You're going to die physically, but God's afraid you'll be like him. And he doesn't say what that means. What that means is God decides what is good and what is not. What is natural and the rules I've set into being, and what you just want to have. And you should not want the things that are not natural that God has already set into being. And so that's what Satan's saying is, you're not going to die. God's just unhappy that you'd be like him. That you could decide what's wrong or what's right. But he doesn't say that. He doesn't say you'll get the chance or you'll get the power. He just says you'll be like him. What does that mean? What does that mean? And so Eve is like, I heard not die, so I'm going to go ahead because the apple looks tasty. And it's like, that's the fucked up part, is that when she goes and does that, and they're like, oh, her eyes are opened and shit, and she gives the fruit to Adam. What that's really about is saying, oh shit, the wool is no longer pulled over their eyes. If they say it's fine to eat the apple, they're free to just go and eat the apple. And then they are no longer, in the way that a child takes what their parents say to do and not do as just the rule of law. And when they get older, they realize, I could just disobey my parents, or I could think that maybe my parents are wrong and just do what I think is right, even though it's not what my parents said. Like, it's kind of that coming of age thing. And Adam and Eve just decide, maybe I can decide what's right and what's wrong. Maybe I don't need to listen to God. And it's a misuse of their free will. It's a misuse because, like, prior to that episode where they take the apple, God walks in easy fellowship with the Lord, they say. He walks through the garden in the still of the evening, and they just talk, and they're just friends, and there's no static between them, But once Eve says, okay, Satan, what do you mean be like God? I mean, it sounds great. God's a great guy. I got a great relationship with him. Yeah, I'm sure I'll be like God. And it's like, no, I should probably get into a soliloquy on the importance of authority, and maybe we'll come back to that later too. But it's like, what you don't realize, here's the fucked up part. Reality. And I mean like reality. I mean like biological facts and cosmological facts and, physical facts. There's gravity is a certain strength. If you hit someone, it hurts. If you throw something up, it comes down. Those things, you don't get to say, well, I know better. I think gravity should be lighter. Like, well, good luck with that. Good luck changing that. Like, the world is what it is, and you must be humble to the fact that the world is what it is. Because you can't change it. I don't care what you have for philosophy. I don't care what you have for science and tools. The world is what it is. And you should sit down and drink your milk. And that's kind of what ancient people discovered, was that they can't pretend to be gods or make utopian worlds like just life is going to be life. They've tried that 1,000 times and it didn't work ever. You need to fall in. You need to cooperate with reality rather than fight it. That's really fucked up. And none of this is ever talked about in the Adam and Eve story. But that's what is behind the apple, okay? Is that the real sin is not, oh, they did something that God told them not to. It's that God said, for your own fucking good, comply with me, because I'm looking out for you. I want the best for you. And you've got to be on my team for me to take care of you. But then Satan comes in and says, oh, no, he doesn't want you making your own decisions. It's like, well, He wants to make your own decisions, but he wants you to make decisions that comply with his plan. And his plan is Planck's constant and the gravitational constant. Like these are things. They're there. You cannot change them. I'm sorry. It's hubris for you to think you can change some of these things. But Adam and Eve said, no, it's fine. If I want to take from this apple, I can. He gave me free will, and they go and do it. And that's what it really comes down to, is that taking the apple shows in a subliminal way that Adam and Eve thought, I know better than God. I know what's right and what's wrong, or I can decide what's right and what's wrong. I don't care what God says. I'm going to do what I think is right, or I'm going to do what I think is not wrong, even though God said it was. And then they're punished for it. And this is true of life. It's true of real life. There are a lot of physical realities, even especially the way other people act toward you, the way you act toward other people. There's just human nature out there that you will never beat. You will never beat it, even with the best of intentions. The world is what it is, and you need to bow to it. That's what is in the apple. So again, like, no, nobody believes that there's actually one fucking human at some point that just was magically made out of mud and all that shit. Although that's probably a reference to the fact that, well, not a reference because they clearly didn't understand or know because they didn't have an archaeological record, but it's interesting that people were made from things of the earth, you know, the primordial ooze and that kind of thing, and evolved out from the ocean, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's coincidentally accurate in a way, in an abstract way, but that's beside the point. The point is that man is of the earth and is inspired with the divine breath, and that's why we are able to see ourselves and contemplate our own existence in a way that a cat never will, like I said earlier. So we are part earth and part physical reality, but touched by God in some way that we have that higher awareness and consciousness that we see the ultimate metaphysical truth as we're sharing a nature in. I'm probably losing you on this, dude. It's really high-minded stuff. But this is what I'm getting at, though, right? Is that, like, we're not just reading the Bible and saying, oh, literally, oh, the day was made in 7 days, so I guess the whole universe is only 6,000 years old. Like, no, that's bullshit. Even the Jews know that's bullshit. Like, Orthodox Jews definitely know that's bullshit. They still keep their calendar by it for, you know, traditional reasons, but the intelligent ones among them know that, like, there's scientific evidence that proves against that, and at the same time, it doesn't disprove what they learned about human nature over the 10, 20, 30,000 years of oral history before they invented writing. I'm sorry. Like, that, it's actually a very good and like, through trial and error, through statistical, like, analysis, like, you know, it's not like they kept records or anything, but just, I don't know, like, it's, they knew it. Like, they did know it, and they learned it the hard way. And it's stupid to just throw that out as saying, oh, it's just mythological mumbo-jumbo. Like, it didn't come out of nowhere. So, we'll get further into this later. Another good thing to think about all of this is, like, why do we talk about the tortoise and the hare, right? Everybody's familiar with this fable, right? Because what's the point of the tortoise and the hare? Means you shouldn't slack off because slow and steady wins the race. You should be project managing, you should be doing bits at a time, and don't worry about that. You will succeed if you're always doing a little of something instead of resting on your laurels and procrastinating like the hare and then sprinting ahead trying to hope you'll beat the turtle, right? And no atheist ever says, oh, well, you know, there was never a rabbit that ever raced a turtle because rabbits and turtles don't care about racing, so this is all bullshit. Like, why don't they challenge that? Because it's just as much bullshit as the Bible. But we tell that story because the moral of the story, what you're supposed to get out of it, is really fucking true. And whether or not anthropomorphic rabbits exist that can speak to turtles is beside the point entirely. It's bullshit. And that's where the Bible's coming from. Like, I don't care whether or not there was a first man and a first woman and only two of them were Homo sapiens, or whether he was actually made from the mud and breathed in. Like, it can be all allegory. The point is, what do you get out of this story? We remember this story because of the message, and that is more important than the details of the metaphor. Now, I come out all aggressive against atheists, but part of why they're kind of dickheads in the way they put forward their argument is because they've been arguing with fundamentalists who do literally believe that there was at some point one guy and one lady and blah, blah, blah. It was made of mud. Like, okay, fine, I get that. But that's a fucking straw man argument, okay, atheists? For you to say, let's take these fundamentalist idiots and their idiotic version of reality and let's attack that. That's a straw man argument. This over here is something entirely different. And it's something that you can't come at from the, you all just believe in a sky fairy. Like, no, you fucking haven't even thought about how deep this shit is. You attacked moron over there who's a fundamentalist. Well, he is a moron, so I agree with you, atheist. He's a moron. Congratulations, we haven't gotten anywhere. The whiskey's wearing off. Sorry to take this back to week one. Actually, week one was really good because it was a Kentucky gentleman. So I feel bad almost wasting my good whiskey. Thanks to my boy for bringing this one on my birthday. He's a good guy. Ooh, maybe I should make one of those. Maybe I should make a not shitty drink one of these days. And make a Negroni, huh? I ain't like that. But, oh my God, really? You guys, I hope you really appreciate what I'm going through here. Because I'm running on fumes and drinking the bad shit and using all of my resources for you because I love you that much. This is my dedication to mission. Put this guy away here. So, again, the message is more important. Let's talk about, for funsies, some of the numbers in the Bible. Because it turns out the Jews were really huge on the holy significance of numbers. They're really good mathematicians. Like, this is kind of the root of the racist stereotype that Jews are good at math. It's because they're right. The Jews actually invented the logarithm fucking well in advance of calculators. I don't know exactly when they invented the logarithm, but yeah, they had a huge fucking table of logarithms from like an unbelievably old age. Jews were very good at math. Mostly because they recognized the significance and the oddity that math was so consistent. And it's also abstract. That's the other fucked up thing. Is it's like, we all know what 4 is, right? Like 4 is a thing. Do we all agree that that's a metaphysical concept? By that I mean, like 4 is real. But my question is, where do you find 4 in the universe? No. I don't mean like my 4 fingers. No. I don't mean like the 4 drinks that I've had tonight. I mean like go out and find the 4. Like find me the 4. And you won't find it. But we find it manifested in so many places. The 4 drinks that I've had. My 4 fingers that I've got. These 4 kids that I have. Like there's... Like 4 is a thing, and we all understand it's a thing, but there is no one 4 out there. There's no, like even, we've got a kilogram, right? Like somewhere in France we have a standard kilogram, this lump of lead or whatever that we put together and said this is what a kilogram is. But even if it's not accurate to, like I've heard that it sublimes every so many years and so it doesn't actually weigh a kilogram anymore. That's cute. What's fucked up is that we still have this idea in our heads that a kilogram should be an exact measurement. How fucked up is it that we all concur that this fictitious fucking thing should rule our measurement lives? That's metaphysics, dude. that certain realities are intangible but more real than the things that we see manifested as that thing. The things that we see manifested as this 1 kilogram of ginger ale, that's an instance of kilogram. The god of kilogram is out there, and we just see it taking an avatar of this thing that weighs exactly 1 kilogram. You see what I'm saying? It's this instantiation of the kilogram. But the kilogram itself is above reproach and above. It's not a being in the world. It's not a thing. It's above being. Does that make sense? That's what metaphysics is, okay? So Jews recognize that numbers are really fucking significant because numbers do some fucked up things sometimes. Like certain math equations are just crazy. And I don't remember the one. There was a certain mathematician who was like, oh shit, I was an atheist my whole life, now I believe in God because this equation is do what now? And I don't have that in front of me, sorry. I'm a bad person. But let's cross a couple of significant numbers in the Bible. And I'm over time, by the way, and I'm sorry about this. I really wanted this to just be an hour episode. But I think it's important. Especially as you read or reread the Bible from a Catholic point of view. And by Catholic, I mean Judaism plus, because everything about Christianity is the fulfillment of the promises to the Jews by God. So it's, to me, they're not different. And I'll come back to that in another episode, I think. But that being said, everything that's important to the Jews is also important to the Catholics. And so when we look at numbers in the Bible, they're all very significant. I don't know how many numbers are actually brought up in the New Testament outside of Jesus' speaking himself. There might be a few in the apostles. I know they converted like 3,000 people in one day, but I don't think that was super significant. Actually, fuck, that could be significant. Damn. All right, so let's dig in. You don't have to be a math nerd to love this, all right? So, a couple of numbers that you'll see in the Bible over and over and over and over and over again, Old Testament and New Testament. When you see these numbers, keep in mind that they are mystical realities that are summed up in a number. They are crystallized. Because again, these are ancient people who witnessed a fact and didn't have the articulation to put it into words, to explain how something was something. So they'd kind of shortcut all of what happened, or the significance of what happened, by enumerating it to a number that meant something to them. And it was a quick shorthand, okay? And that's kind of where historically we've been done a disservice, is that in modern times we have no fucking clue. We take those numbers to be literal numbers, and they're not. Ever. Okay? So, starting with the 7 days. You know what? Not starting with 7 days. Let's go from lowest to highest. When you see the number 3 in the Bible, that symbolizes perfection. Okay? And holiness, really, but perfection. I guess by perfection, completion is another good way to look at that. So, but it's really more perfection. It's completion in a transcendental way. And so that's why you have things like the Trinity, obviously. And we'll come back to what the Trinity means later, too. I'm trying to think of other examples of 3. St. Peter, Jesus' right-hand man, Peter the Apostle, denies Jesus 3 times before he dies. They accuse him, hey, I know you. You look at the guy who's hanging out with Jesus. He's like, oh, fucking Jesus? I don't know that guy. Because I don't want to get hung. I mean, by that I mean I've never run into him. And like, I don't know, man, he got a Galilean accent. He's like, no, I've never run across this Jesus character. Bring me some tea and crumpets. And then they're like, no, but I saw you with him, bro. And he's like, I fucking don't know the guy. Peter fails perfectly. Like, complete failure. And then what's fucked up, too, is that later Jesus comes back, you know, after he's resurrected. And, oh my God, have you ever seen Fist of the North Star? So Jesus comes back Fist of the North Star style, where he's like, got a cloak over his head and nobody recognizes him. And he invites Peter to sit down at a charcoal fire, which is fucked up too, because when Peter denies knowing Jesus, he's sitting in front of a charcoal fire. If you were to take all of the Bible verses and Google charcoal fire just among Bible verses, you'd get exactly 2 instances. One, where he says, I don't know Jesus 3 times. Second time, when Jesus is sitting with him at the fire after the resurrection. And Jesus is cooking him a fucking fish over the charcoal fire. And he goes, does this sound familiar, son? Hey, buddy. Hey, guy. Ah, I smell that charcoal fire. That sound familiar? Hey, Peter, do you love me? And Peter's like, yeah, I love you. It's interesting. Feed my sheep, buddy. Peter, do you love me? Yes, I love you, Jesus. Feed my sheep, guy. Peter's like, what the fuck? Jesus is like, Peter, do you love me? And he's like, God damn it, I told you I love you. And Jesus is like, okay, that's cool. Peter perfectly amends himself. So he's both perfectly ruined and then perfectly saved, redeemed, right? In his second charcoal fire. It's fucked up, man. Anyway, moving on. Number 4. Have you ever seen the number 4 in the Bible? It means totality and the whole. So there are 4 Gospels. That's the whole story of Jesus. And there's a few other instances of 4. The 4 horsemen. So like the world is completely ruined by these 4 things. But it really means like a gathering in. Like nothing is left out. When you see a 4. There's not that many instances of 4 in the whole Bible. 7. 7 is a very important number. And everyone's like, oh, it's lucky. No, it's actually like a lot fucking more than that. It really means covenant. What's a covenant? A covenant is like a promise, but it's an ongoing thing. Some people think of it as a contract, but that's not true. Because with a contract, you say, here's what I want you to do, and here's what I'm going to pay you to do it. And then when it's done, it's going to be done by this point. Now you're held to contract. Pinky swear. And then when you fulfilled it, we're good. Contract is complete. A covenant is by definition never complete. A covenant is, I'm going to do this for you, and you do this for me, and we're going to do this forever. Contracts have to be renewed. Covenants have to be more like reminded, because you're never out of a covenant. That's what 7 is. In fact, the Hebrew word for covenant is a homophone and possibly a homograph. And by that I mean the exact same fucking word for the number 7. When somebody says, I promise to you as a covenant, I will do this forever, the Hebrew pronunciation is, I 7 this that I will this forever. Say that again. I 7 myself to you to do this forever. In fact, one of the best examples of that, I'm about to royally fuck up. Somewhere in the Old Testament, there's a guy who comes to a well. I don't remember if it's Jacob's well. You have to Google this shit. But there's somebody who comes to a well and says, "I promise this land to you, where this well is dug, that I will uphold whatever, and I have 7 sheep with me." And the guy's like, "What's the fucking meaning of your 7 sheep?" And he's like, "Well, that's how much I mean that I'm gonna 7 myself to you. I'm proving that I'm 7ing myself to you." And the guy's like, okay, fine, then you can have this land forever. Like it was in Israel, and I really wish I would have read up on that before I started this video. But that's the deal with 7. And so like that's what's fucked up about the world being created in 7 days, is that the ultimate truth, the hierarchy of hierarchies, this concept that is a consciousness and therefore has a persona, but is not necessarily an old man with a beard, promises himself that I've created the universe so that we can have relationship, and I will be over all of these gods and dedicated to you forever. It's a covenant to you, and I am fulfilling my promise to you forever in creating this universe. That's why the world is made in 7 days, brah. And every time you see 7, think about that. Think about how covenant, ongoing, lifetime dedication applies to the scenario you're reading about, okay? It's fulfillment of the covenant. Like, even when you're talking about this story about Joseph and the coat of many colors, and he's got his dream about 7 starving cows that are then eaten by 7 fat cows, and he's like, no, that's why we should, we're about to have a drought for 7 years, and so everyone's going to be starving, and there's going to be a famine, so we need to save up food now so that we can survive it later for 7 years. And he goes and tells the Egyptians, and he fucking saves Egypt. Of course, Egyptians are not going to credit some bumfuck Jew, peasant from the hinterlands, so that's not in hieroglyphics, but I promise you that's probably fucking true. At least, maybe not exactly 7 years, like some of the exact details are probably wrong, but I promise you something like this happened in history, and it was proven to the people. Like, the Jews that followed this were like, oh shit, like, we follow our guy and shit comes through. So then it just got crystallized into this nice, neat 7. The promise was fulfilled by listening to so and so and listening to Joseph. Like there's this halvesiness to it. There's like something really did happen in the Bible, but probably not the way it's said exactly. But what they got out of it was very much true. So a talking turtle did not talk to a talking rabbit, because neither one of those fucking exists. However, slow and steady does win the race. What's so hard about this concept to pick up? But anyway, so that's what I'm going at. An example of 7. So every time you see 7 in the Bible, think to yourself, what promise is being made? What promise is being kept? And it should go on forever. Those are all the part of 7 every time you see it. So, moving on. 8. What's the number 8? Well, if you've already done the covenant, 8 is going on forward. Like, you fulfilled your dues, but now we continue into the new life of all of the benefits of the covenant all the benefits that came from the covenant are now being lived in forever, beyond the time frame that we wanted to make the covenant happen. Great example, excuse me, is Jews circumcise their sons on the 8th day of their life. Always on the 8th day. Actually, that's not totally true. There's exceptions for, like, if the kid was born on a certain day and 8 days falls on a Sabbath, then it gets kicked over and blah, blah, blah. There's contingencies. But the point is, the 8 is significant not because of mathematical and or retentive purposes. It's that the child is... Also think back to the fact that before modern medicine, childbirth itself was a fucking miracle. Women died in childbirth all the time. They still do, apparently. I heard a stat, but like in modern countries, but in less modern countries, yeah, man, women die in childbirth all the fucking time. So every time a kid is born, praise God, man. And when that kid is born, even then, it's not even a guaranteed. They could die for any number of reasons: not breathing, not breastfeeding soon enough, not like, especially when you're talking about in a 10,000 years ago sense, when there was not all this medicine. Kids died in the first week pretty often. It's a grim, terrible thing to think about, but it's true. But if mom made it through childbirth and the kid made it through his first week of life, that kid was destined by God to live. And you think about how significant that is, because the fact that you're alive, the fact that you exist, means that your mother who birthed you lived through it. And her mother who lived to birth her lived through it. Like, every single human life is really fucking significant because it all makes a difference. Every friend you made, every good thing you ever did, every you carried somebody or produced something, you contributed to human history. Every vote you cast, no matter how insignificant you think it is, changed the course of history in many ways. So every human life is very significant. So to the Jews, once a kid was born, and if it was male that made it to the 8th day, that's when you circumcise that kid. Because after 7 days of that kid being alive, God has kept his covenant. He said this one, he's promised. Rest of his life, he's going to make it as long as he possibly can. And from now, going forward, he's a Jew. He's on God's side. He's part of God's family. And that's why on the 8th day they circumcised. Because now it's beyond the covenant. Now that kid lives in the age of the fruits of that covenant. That make sense? So 8 is now and forever. Fulfilled, and what happens in the fulfillment. What's the epilogue of paradise? Every time you see 8 in the Bible, think about that. Next. 6, the opposite of that. 6 is falling short of the covenant, because the covenant is 7 days. Or 7 period. 6 is not living up to the covenant. 6 is falling short. And a lot of us do. All of us do. We're all sinners. Happens. But when you have things like, say, 666, the mark of the beast. I love Half-Baked, by the way. 666. You know, it's the devil's number. Everybody thinks, what's 666? It's got to add up to this ridiculous number. No, actually, it's a series of 3 6s. 3, as you recall, was the perfection. Or a completion, right? If something is 666, it's failure, failure, failure. Complete and total failure. Complete and total unholiness. So, it's not literally count up 666 things. It's that the devil is aligned with not fulfilling the covenant in the most perfectly unaligned way. Does that make sense? You see where I'm going with that? So 6 is a bad number. Always a bad number. But 666 is the worst number. It's just the perfectly worst number. So you're reading Revelations wrong if you're looking for a count of 666 things. It's a set of 3 6s is what that is. Moving forward. 10. 10 is the letter of the law. And order is really what it is. And that's why there's 10 commandments. There are very few references to 10 in the Bible that I can recall, but I want to say that every time you see a 10, it looks lawful. It looks orderly. It looks authoritative. And I really wish I would have written down a different instance than the 10 commandments, but that's part of it. So 12. I don't have enough fingers. 12 refers to the 12 tribes of Israel, 12 different peoples, 12 different nations, and the burping. Governance. 12 is governance. But 12 is really a multitude of people, more than anything else. And you have the 12 tribes of Israel. You also have, when Jesus goes and makes his first closest set of followers, he names 12 apostles for the same reasons. It follows that rubric of the tribes of Israel. So like Israel fractionates, I don't remember the word. Anyway, and fragments into 12 tribes. And that's to say that like a number of nations, a lot of people, a lot of different peoples is the most important thing. And so like all of the apostles have their own personalities as well, and it's kind of represented in that. And so anytime you see 12, it means a number of varied people. It's usually, I think it's almost always people. I don't think 12 applies to anything in the Bible that's not people. I have to go back and study that. So 12 always means a variety of people from different nations, right? Multitude. But also governance is part of it too. Like they have order among them. 40 is a really critical number in the Bible. 40 is a time of preparation. A time when you suffer in advance to then go and do something very important. So for example, you've got Noah and the flood. Probably the first thing you thought about, right? Rains for 40 days, rains for 40 nights, and then Noah finds land, right? Well, the whole point is that And there's historical reasons to believe, like archaeological evidence to believe, that this flood or some cataclysm took place around 1170 BC. I think I mentioned that already. It doesn't mean the entire fucking globe flooded, because I just talked about this. Like, we're not biblical literalists. If these people only knew everything between the Tigris and the Euphrates, which are both known to flood regularly, but there was an irregular year where maybe a glacier upstream melted and just everything between both rivers flooded, well, that's their whole fucking world. So why wouldn't they describe that as the whole world flooded? It's not unreasonable to say. But, and it might not have been for exactly 40 days. However, they probably recognized that what was born out of that cleansing of everybody was that a new society that was better came out of it. And so they made it 40 to be numerological. By that I mean symbolized in a number. That this was a harsh trial that gave way to a better way of life afterward. And you will find the number 40 multiple times in the Bible. And every single time it is applied as a time of suffering and a time of there's a word I'm looking for, not having a deprivation, where you are preparing for a better time in life. So another use of the word of 40 is Jesus goes in the desert before he starts his ministry, before he recruits his first apostle. He goes out to the desert to meditate for 40 days. And that's the idea. He starves. He does nothing for a while. Like he suffers out there in the heat for 40 days to purify himself so that then he can begin his ministry in earnest. Another great example, Moses. After Moses leaves Egypt, he takes the Egyptians out into the wider desert that is not Egypt, which is, northeast of Egypt. And they're looking for the promised land and all that jazz. And they wander for 40 years, which is a fucking long time. But it's because they need to be purified. They need to be de-Egyptianized, because a lot of them gave into Egyptian culture, which was pagan. And, like, they were Jewish by blood, but they worshipped Ra and Horus and all that shit. And God wanted to get that out of their system before they were ready to settle into Israel, where they could clearly, without distraction, worship him. And so that's where the 40 years comes in. Maybe they weren't out there for exactly 40 years. It could have been 3, it could have been 10, it could have been 57. I love Heinz 57 sauce. It's a great one. But in the end of the day, the time they spent in trial to prepare for living in Egypt, or living in Israel, they made it 40. They wrote it down as 40, because 40 meant a time of preparation, a time of suffering in preparation. Another good example, Lent. Is it Lent? 40 days? 40, yeah, 40 days of Lent, right? Is that right? Am I making this up? Yeah, 40 days, right. You don't count Sundays. And it's 40 days, not counting the Sundays, before Easter. And that's the idea, is that when Easter starts, it's your Catholic New Year. So you should start everything fresh. It's time to lose weight the way we do in January, but it's the Christian version of that. It's like time to quit using porn or something. So it's like you take those 40 days before the Lent time and don't eat meat and you give up something and you prep so that when Easter comes, you're ready to start a new era, man. 40 is preparation every time you see it in the Bible. So, 1,000 is another good number in the Bible. 1,000 basically means countless, which is funny because you're like, well, I counted them and there's 1,000. But it's like, to an ancient people, that actually meant just a fuck ton. It basically says 1,000 is Yiddish for a fuck ton. You think of it that way, okay? So it's countless, but it is finite. But it's a shit ton. And It's like in the book of Revelation, they say, oh, we're going to chain up Satan or the devil or the dragon or whatever it's called, and he'll be thrown in the dungeon for 1,000 years, and then he'll be let out. What they mean is for a fuck long time, and then shit's going to get real. Not an exact 1,000. And I should really go into Revelation probably in a future episode, but that particular example is almost like, excuse me, it's weird how it played out to be almost exactly that, where for a fuck long time, everybody was very Christian, and then people got really doubtful by around the 1400s, and then the Reformation came out, and we'll come back to all of that, but you can see how that's not exactly 1,000 years, but it is a fuck long time, and it's roughly almost 1,000. It's kind of weird. So 666 we talked about. Another nifty number in the Book of Revelation is that there's exactly 144,000 saints saved in the rapture, which is funny because that word never appears in the Bible. But the 144,000, if you think about that, especially in the Jewish numerology way, because again, they use math, but in symbolic ways, not direct mathematical ways. So 144,000 you can get to by multiplying 12 times 12 times 1,000. And what they mean is all the nations of the earth, 12. No, I mean like really fucking all the nations of the earth times 12. Only a certain number will be saved, but a fuck ton will be saved. So it's like 1,000. So that's 12 times 12 times 1,000 will be saved. So it's still a minority, especially when you consider like the Earth today has like 7 billion people on it, and then when you instantiate that over time, how many people died, like the 4 billion people on the Earth in the 1800s that died of, I don't know, fucking Spanish flu in the 1900s early, but like, there's been much more than those number of people, but over the course of time, only a minor shit ton of people from a lot of different places have made it into heaven, is essentially what they're trying to say in that 144,000. That make sense? It's again, people who knew something that was true but didn't know how to articulate it, said so in a story that was symbolic, and it's encoded in things like the numbers. And I'm really hoping you're getting out of this that a literal reading is stupid, and also a symbolic reading, if you know the symbols, is fucking deep and crazy. That's what I'm trying to get to. Now, what's weird is that I've been talking for an hour and a half and I have to pee. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to be right back. This is my bathroom. Oh my god, I felt like Tom Hanks in A League of Their Own. Okay, yeah, I gotta get one more. Sorry about that. I'm really sad that I didn't have enough Cape Cod to make it through the whole episode, like, a lot. Things always... So, what I'm hoping is that you'll judge me by my enthusiasm and not by my level of planning. So So we're just going to do a little bit of this because I only have so much Coke left. I don't want to go crazy. I'm not entirely sure what responsible drinking is. Here we go. And I hope you're having a good time, because I certainly am. I love these concepts and these things and these mind-bending numbers and everything. So, so that about does it for numbers. Let's talk about symbols, okay? Things you might see in the Bible pretty frequently is, again, we talked about water. Every time you see water, somebody's beginning anew, somebody's starting something fresh. And that's, like the direct correlation there is baptism, man. And baptism was not new to the Jews with John the Baptist. Like when he was doing that, everybody understood what he was doing because, like I said, they used to build around the temple, around the main temple in Israel. They had these baths that people would purify themselves in before they went into the temple. Which is fucked up because symbolically that's exactly what Catholic churches do with that little cup of holy water by the door. When you walk in and you stick your hand in that and you bless yourself with the cross, that's what you're doing. Is you're actually doing the Jewish thing of doing the mikvah and the cleansing with the ritual water, but that's entirely lost on us today. But that's what we're doing is we're mimicking what the mikvah is before you go up to the temple, and so water is always that. In baptism, for sure. You go into the Jordan, when John the Baptist is like, hey, we're going to bring your whole body down in here. When you come up, you're going to be a new guy. Like, that's the whole point, is you've cleansed yourself of sin in your previous life, and you're ready to now move on to something bigger. And the priest uses this at every Mass. You might see near the end of it, about 3/4 through the Mass, the altar server, he comes up with a bowl of water, and the priest will wash his hands. Obviously, he's not doing a great job, but it's symbolic to begin with. And he dips his hands in the water and shakes them off and wipes them with a towel. And actually, the priest, if you've never been an altar server, and I promise you're not if you're watching this, I was an altar server, and I could hear the priest. He whispers it to himself as part of the ritual. He says, "Lord, wash away my iniquities and cleanse me of my sin." And that's the messed up part. Like, to me, I think that's great that the priest is also just a dude, man. He's sinful. And, like, we're all here trying to carry on the work of God, and none of us are perfect or fit for it. But fucking try. That's why I'm drinking and swearing in the name of God. Sorry, big guy. But it's fucking true. Fire as a symbol, right? It is true that fire is generally thought of as a offensive weapon. The flame of God, the wrath of God, blah, 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 especially Sodom and Gomorrah. He's fucking Draculaing that shit, like opening his cape and columns of fire, which is awesome, because I love Alucard. But fire in the Bible also is used just as often, if not more so, as a purifying force. When you look at the Holy Spirit coming down as tongues of fire on the apostles, or the seraph that comes down, I'm trying to think of who it is. Is it the Revelator? Is it John the Revelator? No, I think it's Prophet Samuel, who puts the coal on his tongue and burns his tongue, and he's not killed or hurt by it, but it burns the sin out of his words. That's the idea, is that like ancient people knew that you could take a mineral like gold mixed with lead, and I don't know the mineral properties, why I need to speak to a geologist, but I'm pretty sure you usually find gold mixed with lead where it forms naturally, and that was the whole idea, was that if you burned that substance, the gold would melt at a different point the lead melted, so you could separate gold from lead that way. And actually, to this day, aluminum is made that way. Like, aluminum was a very expensive metal forever because they didn't know how to get aluminum out of the rocks that it's found with until they developed electric shock technology and mechanics that could actually use electrolytes or some shit to pull the aluminum out of what it is. And now it turns out that's a very fucking cheap process, which is why we make aluminum cans. Google that shit. But ancient people knew that you had to melt a certain, a mixed precious metal with something else like a rock or a shitty metal to pull the good shit out of it. So purifying by fire is an old ass symbology. And so when you see fire, generally speaking, yeah, it is to also kill your enemies. Everybody knows about that one. But in the duality of life, fire also purifies and makes things real. Trial by fire is a cliche for a reason. So when you see fire in the Bible, see it on both ends. Punishment and also purity. Something better comes out of being burned, right? So, for that matter, fire can also refer to strength of spirit, enthusiasm, right? So like the seraphs in Judaism, the word seraph means the burning ones. They just rage with passion for God, and like that's kind of the fucked up part. Like when we take the angels have ranks, and they have a hierarchy too, and the highest ranking angels, the most potent ones, the most competent and powerful ones, are the seraphs, the burning ones. And what do? They sing God's praises. Day in, day out. They don't even respect days because they're eternal anyway and they're metaphysical, so time means nothing to them. And yet they spend their power doing nothing but singing praises to God. I'm going to come back to that too. We go to how the Mass works, because fucking that shit is awesome. But it's like, dude, you're given phenomenal cosmic power and not an itty-bitty living space, and you spend it singing praises to God? And it's like, it turns out, yeah, fuck right you would, because that's what you should do with that kind of power. Booyah, seraphs. Fire is awesome, for the record. So, going on. Other symbols, you got oil, okay? Every time you see oil in the Bible, they're not always talking about like the way Arabs make money on gasoline. They're talking about olive oil, generally speaking. Sometimes other oils too. But they really didn't, like tar oil or whatever it is they make gas out of, they didn't know about that so much. A little bit. They have oil lamps to make light. But generally speaking, especially when they're talking about anointing, they were using olive oil. Possibly some other oils too. But they always saw that as a symbol of divinity. Especially because they learned very early on, it's easy to figure out, that oil does not mix with water. So when you put olive oil and water in a cup, the oil sinks to the bottom or floats to the top. But they separate. And there's a definite difference in the existence, in the matter of oil from water. And water is very much associated with the earth and the corporeal and the world that we know. So oil was seen as divine. So when somebody would become king, they anointed him with oil on his face and to wash him up. Or when the warriors would go out to fight, they would rub olive oil on their bodies so that should their sword fighting and shield fighting not work and they became disarmed and they ended up having to resort to hand-to-hand combat, being oiled up really fucking helped you in a wrestling match, because then somebody couldn't get a grip on you, couldn't put you in a hold, submission hold, like you could slip out of that shit and pound that motherfucker. And so like oil was a savior. And for that matter, oil is really good on wounds also, like pro tip. If you get like a bug bite or something, rub some olive oil on it. So olive oil was always seen as divine, something transcendental that is a part of our life, but connected to something super. I'll put it that way. And the other one is holy. Okay, the word holy. What's messed up and strange is that holy in the Jewish word for holy, it literally means set aside, and Hebrew, I should say, means set aside. And there's levels of this, is the other thing that's weird, is it's not I don't know. I feel like I get the impression that the general culture today says, oh, if something's holy, then it's way up here and it's sacrosanct. It's like, well, that's true, but there's actually gradations of holiness, okay? So, for example, the whole universe existing at all is God's creation. Because we say that he created the whole universe. So, if God created it, then it is special and it is holy, right? And that's true, but then it's like, out of all of the stars and galaxies in the universe, this one is the one where humans and intelligent life came to be. So the sun and the earth are more special than any other star. It's holy. The solar system is holy, especially compared to all of the other star systems. In that, the sun has 9 planets, or you can argue about Pluto or whatever. But the Earth is holy because Mars doesn't have life on it. Venus doesn't have life on it. Jupiter doesn't have life on it. So the Earth is holy, set aside for God's purposes, more so than the other planets. On the Earth, you have all of the lands, all of the places that people live, all of the nations. Right? And they're all good. God loves all of them. He made all the humans. But Israel, he revealed himself to say, I know that Egypt recognized that the sun was important, and I did make the sun. And I know that Hindus recognized that cows were important, and I did make the cows. And I know that the Native Americans recognized that the earth itself and the planets were important, but I made the earth and the planets. It's Israel that I revealed that something was higher than all of those things. And so God revealed himself to Israel as holy among nations. See what I'm saying? So holy is always a relative term set aside for God's purposes. This is where God comes in. And in Israel, all of that land, all the farmland is great and it's blessed, but it's the Jerusalem in the temple that is holy among Israel. It's set aside for God's purposes compared to the rest of Israel. And even in the temple, the back room where the relics are held is holy among holies, holy among all the spaces of the temple. It's set aside for God's purposes more than the temple. Sitting in the pews is set aside for God's purposes compared to the countryside of Israel, but the Holy of Holies is set aside for God's purposes, and it gets deeper, and it gets deeper, and it gets deeper. So holiness is a relative term. Whenever you see holy, think not just of what it is that looks blessed in that reference, but also how it compares to the things of its level of specificity. We good? We going somewhere? Holy means set aside for God's purposes. So the earth itself is holy. Totally fucking true. Why we should care about climate change. But Israel is holy among nations. Why we should care about Israel. And the temple is holy. Why we should care about the temple as compared to the rest of Israel. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's fine that there's layers to this because there's a hierarchy to it. And all of them are important. Every layer of that hierarchy is important. And especially to understand its role in how the whole hierarchy benefits from understanding its productivity in this order. And that's even metaphysical. Why the thrones are very fucking important, but subordinate to the cherubim. Look into this shit. Anyway, also if you want to look up angels and shit, Mike Miraval, smart guy. Miraville, I think is how you spell his last name. Mark Miraval. He's got a really good talk on angels. You should look that shit up. So, My last point here is the theology of the body, okay? This was a set of speeches given by John Paul II, Pope, who is now a saint. So he's Saint Pope John Paul II. He was probably the best pope that we could have ever had, honestly. Like, I love Francis, but I think Pope John Paul II was... He's still... There's some big shoes to fill, man. And he gave a series of talks. I don't remember if it was somewhere between 40 and 100, or maybe even more than that. But anyway, the speeches, he had a sequence of talks where he was talking about how important it is to be embodied, to have flesh, to have a human body. How important the human is. Like I mentioned a couple of times in this episode, how humans are different from animals, and that's really fucking significant to consider. And he's not talking about humans as a species to other species. He's talking even about the holiness, again, the levels of holiness and the depth of holiness you can go. The holiness of your body to the rest of the world. And your body to other bodies. But really he means the fact that humans are made of flesh. Just, it's fucked up, man. Like, I can't even get into it. Pope John Paul II, his book, it wasn't even his book because he died before he could finish it, but somebody else compiled all his notes, and they made a book that was something like 850 pages long. And pro tip, I don't read. I hate reading. It puts me to sleep, so I watch a lot of YouTube. But 850 pages of fucking gold. Like, really theological, deep thinking fucking gold. How important it is to not be an animal. To understand that you have intelligence in a world that is largely not intelligent. It's kind of fucked up to be like, that chair doesn't think about its existence. And this house doesn't think about its existence. And my cat doesn't think about its existence. I think about my existence. And I'm existent, and I have a will and a destiny and a thing that I want to enforce and manifest in the world, like a goal. And these things are life-changing, world-changing. It's why we have global warming. Like, we've wanted to build factories in progress that we've wrecked the world, but where did our ambition come from? Like, we're talking about the deepest fucking what it means to be human is in the theology of the body. But it's so deep that it's this impenetrable, very thick text. If you wanted to kind of graze the surface of it, you want to find a guy's book, Christopher West's Theology of the Body for Beginners. Is a really good short summary. It's more like 150 pages of just boiling down what this thick-ass text is about. But definitely look up Christopher West, not Christopher Cross. He sounds Catholic, but he's not. Christopher West, Theology of the Body for Beginners. Really good book. Crazy shit. Existential shit. And the fucked up thesis of it is that having a body at all, a human body, with a consciousness, we can detect or at least suspect that there's a consciousness out there, that there's an order to the world that is not of the world, that the world only makes sense if there's this consciousness, man, I'm burping all over the place, if there's this consciousness that exists outside of the world itself, to then speak order into being, the way Genesis says, right? The Logos. And we know this to be true because, like, Any ordered system, if unattended, becomes entirely disordered. But the world we live in is very fucking ordered. So where did that come from? Like, how does every human body stay ordered? Like, I mean, I guess there's some exceptions, random to this. But generally speaking, we all have a head. We all have 2 eyes. We have a nose and a mouth and 10 fingers. And why does that always have to be? And we can say, oh, it's in the DNA. But it's like, well, then where did the DNA come from? Like, why does that have an order? How does a fucking microscopic thread of amino acids detect a destiny or determine a destiny? Like, that's more fucked up than you want to give it credit for. And the fact that the human body exists is the first clue that God exists. And that's kind of where Theology of the Body goes into. I really recommend reading that book. And really what it is that it's our existence as humans is the first evidence that God exists. Because again, we're the only species that can question our own existence. That spends time worrying about this and not where am I going to eat and who am I going to fuck before tomorrow. Like every other creature, that's pretty much all they think about. Humans have the time to think about, why is the sky blue? Why is there something rather than nothing? Like, there's got to be something deeper to this. And why were we chosen? And what makes us above all that shit? And so, what's really messed up is that the human body existing, connecting the soul, I'll be honest, the soul. Like, we've argued for centuries now, where does the consciousness reside? And we like to say, oh, it's all in the brain. This is all an illusion. And, Buddhists go into this too. Like the reality you're living is actually an illusion, and what you really are is this thing in a metaphysical space. That could be true. And Catholics kind of say that is true as well. That your soul is what you really are. And the only way you experience other souls in this life is through the avatar of your physical body that you're in. And so you witness other physical bodies, but really what you're getting to do is learning who that other soul is, that they exist and what is their nature, through the interface of your body and their body, right? And we're all just kind of meeting in the material world as a medium, as a chat room. And it's fucked up to think about. It's really fucked up. Because, for that matter, people never think, oh, here's this asshole making YouTube comments. I'm going to tell him he's a stupid douchebag. But it's like, you never think about the fact that that person who signed that comment, I mean, they could be a bot, I guess, in this day and age. But for the most part, that's a person who got this opinion through experiences they had that were real to them. So don't discount where they came from, even if they come off hateful. I mean, there are shitholes for coming out hateful, but they didn't get that opinion for no reason. It's their shitty inability to articulate a truth that they experienced through trial and error. Coming back to the beginning of this episode, man. So, everyone here who wants to tell me, oh, you live in a Skyfarer and you're a fucking douchebag, whatever, say it. Go ahead, say it in the comments. I don't give a shit, man. I know that what I'm talking about is the truth, and I'll be willing to have that conversation in the mirror. It's just, it's kind of fucked up that having a human body means God's presence is in you, and that truth is now made manifest in an instance of a body that you're part of. And you need to comply with what that truth is trying to say in this world. And so it makes it a sacrament. And we're going to get to that in episode 6. I'm sorry that's some time away. but it's where the spiritual meets the material, where they merge, where the material now rises up to meet the metaphysical truths and becomes that truth for just a second. And I feel like if you've watched enough Jordan Peterson, you've found that. Like, you've seen that he describes how that is, but man, the fucking sacrament is the time where you're in that, and you are that, and you feel that. It's a really powerful fucking thing, man. Get into sacraments. So with that being said, I'm reaching my 2-hour mark. Thanks for sticking it out. I'm sorry I didn't have enough vodka to make Cape Codders. I don't even know how to get made Cape Codders. Google that shit. It's called Cape Cod, I swear to God. I love you. Thanks for being here. Go to Mass, say your prayers. Good night.